Hello, especially for the Dirty Secrets channel.
Elizabeth Morgan wiped her damp hands on her apron and stepped back to admire her work. The dining room glowed in soft candlelight, crystal glasses catching the flame in prismatic splendor. 15 years of marriage deserved this level of celebration. Crystal was the traditional gift, and she'd spent weeks tracking down the perfect vintage champagne flutes. "Perfect," she whispered, adjusting a linen napkin ever so slightly. Her phone chimed with a text from David, running 30 minutes late. "Client meeting." "Sorry." Elizabeth sighed but smiled. His dedication to the architectural firm had afforded them this beautiful Victorian home in Boston's Beacon Hill. The slight delay meant more time to perfect everything. She returned to the kitchen where the beef Wellington rested, his favorite meal that she prepared only on special occasions. As she stirred the béarnaise sauce, her mind drifted to their years together. College sweethearts who'd married young, the fertility struggles, the career sacrifices she'd made. But they'd built something beautiful together, a partnership of equals, he always said. Elizabeth glanced at the small velvet box containing her gift to him, crystal cufflinks with their initials entwined. She wondered what he had planned for her. Last year's anniversary gift had been surprisingly impersonal, a spa certificate rather than the thoughtful presents of years past. But she'd been overthinking things lately. Her therapist called it anxiety projection. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. She wasn't expecting anyone else. "Delivery for Mrs. Morgan," a courier announced, handing her a long white box with no sender information. Elizabeth brought it to the kitchen counter, curiosity piqued. Inside lay a single red rose and a small note card with elegant script. "The truth will set you free." She frowned, turning the card over, finding nothing else. A wrong delivery, perhaps? She set it aside as the front door opened. "Honey, I'm home," David called, his deep voice resonating through their home. "Something smells amazing." Elizabeth touched the mysterious note once more before tucking it into her pocket. She forced her brightest smile and went to greet her husband, unaware that in 24 hours nothing in her carefully constructed world would remain intact. "To 15 years," David said, raising his crystal flute. Elizabeth clinked her glass against his. "To us." The dinner had gone perfectly. David had presented her with a beautiful diamond bracelet, kissing her wrist as he fastened it. He seemed relaxed, happy, present, unlike the distracted man he'd been the past few months. "How was Milan?" she asked, refilling his wineglass. He'd returned from a business trip just 3 days ago. "Rome," he corrected automatically. "Milan was last month." "Right," Elizabeth smiled, though something prickled at the back of her mind. "Did you see the Colosseum this time?" "No time for sightseeing. Meetings back to back." He took another bite of Wellington. "This is incredible, Liz." "You said the same about Milan," she remarked casually. "Always meetings." He paused mid-chew. "That's the job." "I know." She smiled, twisting her wedding band. "I just thought you mentioned the Colosseum in your texts." David's expression flickered momentarily before settling back into ease. "That was from the hotel balcony. You can see it from certain rooms." "Ah." Elizabeth nodded, not mentioning that she'd looked up his hotel after their call. It had been on the opposite side of the city. Conversation moved on to safer topics, but Elizabeth's mind kept circling back. David had specifically talked about touring the Colosseum on Tuesday. He'd sent a selfie with it in the background. But if he hadn't gone sightseeing... Through dinner, as David loaded the dishwasher, his one household contribution, Elizabeth slipped away to their bedroom and opened her text history. The selfie at the Colosseum was there, but something about it seemed off. She zoomed in, examining details. The lighting didn't match the time he'd sent it. And was that... She squinted at his collar, noticing a different shirt than the one he'd packed. Her phone suddenly chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Look closer." Elizabeth nearly dropped the phone. She glanced toward the hallway, hearing David humming in the kitchen. With trembling fingers, she replied, "Who is this?" No response came. She downloaded the Colosseum photo to examine it more carefully later, then rejoined David for dessert, her mind racing with questions she wasn't yet ready to ask. The morning after their anniversary, Elizabeth awoke alone. David's note on the pillow explained he'd gone for an early tennis game with Richard from work. She stretched, feeling the lingering effects of too much wine and too little sleep. Her dreams had been troubled, filled with shadows and half-truths. The mysterious rose delivery from yesterday nagged at her thoughts. She dismissed it, but combined with the text and discrepancies in David's stories, a knot of unease had formed in her stomach. Elizabeth made coffee and carried it to her small home office. She rarely used the desktop computer since getting her laptop, but it still housed their photo archives. She found herself scrolling through folders of their past. Vacation photos, holiday gatherings, candid moments, 15 years of shared history. The doorbell rang again, startling her from her reminiscing. Another courier, another unmarked package. This one was larger, heavier. "Is this some kind of anniversary scavenger hunt?" she asked the courier. The young man shrugged. "Just delivering, ma'am." Elizabeth unwrapped the package on the kitchen counter. Inside was a leather-bound photo album she'd never seen before. Opening it revealed photos of David with another woman. Dozens of images spanning what appeared to be years. Intimate dinners, beach vacations, holiday celebrations mirroring her own. Her coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. The woman was beautiful, younger, with dark hair and striking features unlike Elizabeth's blonde conservatism. On the final page was a handwritten note. "This isn't even half of it. 7 years of your marriage has been shared with me. I'm sorry." Elizabeth sank to the floor amid coffee and ceramic shards, the album clutched to her chest. Her phone rang. David. "Hey, finished early. Wanna grab brunch?" Casual normalcy in his voice made her physically ill. "I'm not feeling well," she managed. "You go ahead." "Everything okay?" "Just a migraine." The lie came easily. "I need to sleep it off." "All right. Take your medication. I'll bring home dinner." After hanging up, Elizabeth returned to her computer with new purpose. She searched through years of financial records, travel itineraries, and email archives. Slowly, discrepancies emerged. Weekend conferences that didn't appear on professional websites. Credit card charges in cities he claimed never to have visited. Email receipts for gifts she'd never received. A new text message appeared. "Check the basement storage." Red suitcase behind the Christmas decorations. Heart pounding, Elizabeth descended the stairs. The red suitcase contained more evidence, hotel receipts, ticket stubs, restaurant bills, all from places David had allegedly visited alone for business. Most damning were printed emails between David and someone named Sophia, dating back 7 years. Their correspondence revealed an ongoing relationship, references to a shared apartment, and discussions about Elizabeth that made her physically sick. "She suspects nothing. Completely trusts me." "How long can we keep this up?" "As long as necessary. I'll figure it out." The most recent email was from just 2 days before their anniversary. "Soon, I promise. After this work situation settles down." Elizabeth sat amid the evidence, numb. Her 15-year marriage a fraud. For nearly half of it, she'd been unknowingly sharing her husband with another woman. She tried calling David, but it went straight to voicemail. According to his morning note, he should be finishing tennis with Richard now. She called Richard's wife Karen. "Elizabeth, how are you? How was the anniversary?" "Good, thanks." "Is Richard home from tennis yet?" A pause. "Tennis? Richard's in Chicago this weekend. Business trip." Elizabeth's grip tightened on her phone. "Sorry, my mistake. David must be playing with someone else." After hanging up, she tried David again. Still no answer. She texted him, "Where are you really?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Minutes later, finishing up. "Everything okay?" Elizabeth made a decision. She changed into jeans and a casual sweater, grabbed her car keys, and activated the phone tracking app they'd installed years ago for safety. David's location showed him across town at an address she didn't recognize. 20 minutes later, she parked across from an upscale apartment building in Back Bay. According to the tracking app, David was inside. Elizabeth waited, unsure what she was doing or what she'd say if confronted. Her ringing phone startled her, David's face appearing on the screen. "Hey, just checking in. You feeling any better?" His voice sounded normal, but there was street noise in the background. "A little," she lied. "Where are you now?" "Just leaving the club. Traffic's bad, so I might stop for groceries. Need anything?" Through her windshield, Elizabeth watched as David emerged from the building's front door, phone to his ear, getting into his car parked right outside. "No," she whispered. "I don't need anything from you." Elizabeth followed David at a careful distance. Instead of heading toward a grocery store, he drove to an upscale shopping district and parked. She watched from her car as he entered a jewelry store, the same one where he'd purchased her anniversary bracelet. 20 minutes later, he emerged with a small bag and checked his watch before hurrying down the block to a flower shop. The scene was achingly familiar, the same routine he performed before their special occasions. Only this time, she wasn't the recipient. Elizabeth trailed him back to the apartment building. This time, she waited until he'd gone inside before approaching the entrance. The doorman looked up expectantly. "I'm here to surprise my husband," she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. "David Morgan? He just went up." The doorman smiled. "Of course, Mrs. Winters. He just arrived. Shall I announce you?" "Winters. Not Morgan." "No, I want it to be a surprise," Elizabeth managed. "Which floor?" "12th. 12B, she nodded her thanks and entered the elevator, pressing 12 with a trembling finger. Outside 12B, she hesitated, hearing David's voice within, followed by a woman's laughter. Her hand hovered over the doorbell, then dropped. She couldn't face it yet. Not like this. Back in her car, Elizabeth dissolved into tears. When her phone chimed with a text from David saying he was stopping for groceries and would be home in an hour, she didn't bother responding. Instead, she drove to the address listed on the receipt she'd found, a post office box facility. Using David's birth year as the entry code, she accessed the box. Inside were bank statements for accounts she'd never seen, in both David's name and the joint name Morgan Winters. Years of statements revealed substantial regular transfers, money that should have been part of their shared finances. Elizabeth gathered everything and returned home, arriving minutes before David. She hid the evidence in her art studio, the one place he never entered, and washed her face. When David walked in with groceries and takeout, she greeted him with a practiced smile. "Feeling better?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Much, Shalit." "How was tennis?" "Great. Richard's improving." Elizabeth nodded, the casual lie cutting deeper than any of the evidence. "I'm going to take a hot bath before dinner." Upstairs, she locked the bathroom door and sank into the steaming water, trying to wash away the reality of what she'd learned. Her husband was living a double life, complete with another home and possibly another wife. The next morning, Elizabeth called in sick to the gallery where she worked as a curator. After David left for the office, she began a systematic examination of their life together, determined to understand how deep the deception went. She started with their wedding album. The happy couple, surrounded by friends and family, had he been faithful even then? She scrutinized photos of their courtship, recalling how they'd met in that art history class. He'd pursued her relentlessly, appearing everywhere she went, as if by perfect coincidence. Had any of it been genuine? Elizabeth turned to their digital archives, reviewing emails and messages from their early days. She noticed something odd, gaps in their communication history during periods she distinctly remembered constant contact. Entire months missing from their sophomore year archives. She found an old external hard drive and connected it to her computer. Contained backups from her college laptop. There she found the missing messages, apparently deleted from her current archives. Reading through them revealed subtle discrepancies in the stories David had told about his background and family. Elizabeth reached for her phone and called her college roommate, Amanda, whom she hadn't spoken with in years. "Liz? Oh my God, it's been forever." After brief catching up, Elizabeth steered the conversation toward the past. "I was going through old photos and wondering, what was your first impression of David when I started dating him?" Amanda hesitated. "Honestly, I thought he was a bit calculated." "What do you mean?" "The way he showed up everywhere. Remember how he accidentally enrolled in 3 of your class's second semester? And when we later found out he'd switched his major just to match yours?" Elizabeth's throat tightened. "I thought it was romantic. It was intense. Remember that weird situation with Professor Hayden's recommendation? You were so upset." Elizabeth frowned. "What recommendation?" "For the Paris internship. When David somehow got chosen instead of you, despite you being Hayden's favorite. You were devastated." Elizabeth had no recollection of this. I don't remember applying for that." A long pause. "Liz, you worked on that application for months. You had me proofread it 10 times. After ending the call, Elizabeth sat motionless, trying to reconcile this information with her memories. She remembered wanting the Paris internship, but deciding not to apply after David encouraged her to focus on their relationship instead. Had he stolen her opportunity? Worse, had he somehow made her forget? She dug through old journals, finding entries that seemed written by a different person, a more ambitious, independent woman with dreams that didn't revolve around David. Her phone chimed with another anonymous text. "He's been gaslighting you from the beginning. Check your medical records." Elizabeth spent the afternoon at her doctor's office, requesting complete medical records. The receptionist had been reluctant until Elizabeth mentioned possible medication discrepancies that might explain her memory issues. Back home, scanning through years of documentation, Elizabeth found what the mysterious texter had hinted at. 6 years into their marriage, she'd been prescribed anti-anxiety medication following what was described as acute stress response to pregnancy loss. But they'd never been pregnant. They'd tried, unsuccessfully, for years before agreeing to remain childless. According to the records, the medication had been adjusted several times, with notes about persistent memory concerns and increased suggestibility. Most disturbing was a notation that her husband had been authorized to manage her medication regimen due to her compromised state. Elizabeth searched their bathroom cabinets until she found her daily supplement organizer, filled each week by David to help keep her organized. She examined the small white pill she'd been taking each morning, supposedly a vitamin D supplement. Didn't match any vitamin D images online. She placed the pills in an envelope and then continued her investigation, venturing into their attic where boxes of pre-digital memories were stored. In a dusty corner, she found a taped-up box labeled David College. Inside were notebooks, photos, and a leather-bound journal she'd never seen. The journal detailed David's obsessive pursuit of her, but with a coldness that chilled her blood. He documented his strategies for isolating her from friends, his character research to become her perfect partner, and most disturbing, his real motivation. Elizabeth's family connections in the art world are the perfect entry point. Once we're married, her trust fund becomes accessible, and her gallery contacts will provide the authentication credentials I need. The long game, but worth it. Trust fund? Elizabeth had no trust fund. Her parents were middle-class educators. Further entries revealed a systematic campaign to alter her perception of reality, including accidental gas leaks in their first apartment that had left her disoriented and dependent on his account of events. The final entry was dated just before their wedding. Mission accomplished. Ring on finger. The convenient hysteria over the pregnancy scare worked perfectly. She now believes her parents disapproved of our marriage. In reality, they were asking too many questions about my background. With them effectively estranged, phase 2 begins. Elizabeth grabbed the attic railing, suddenly dizzy. Her estrangement from her parents, which she'd always believed resulted from their disapproval of her whirlwind marriage, had been engineered by David? Her phone rang. It was her mother's assisted living facility. Mrs. Morgan? We're calling about your monthly visit scheduled for tomorrow. Elizabeth froze. My what? Your standing appointment to visit your mother? Every third Thursday? Ah, yes. Of course. I'll be there. She hung up, stunned. Her mother was alive? For 15 years, David had maintained that both her parents had died, her father of a heart attack before their wedding, her mother of cancer 3 years later. Elizabeth sank to the floor amid the evidence of her shattered reality. The man she'd married wasn't just a cheater with a double life. He was something far more sinister, a calculated manipulator who had systematically dismantled her identity, relationships, and even her memories. Her phone chimed with another text. Now you know who you married. Do you want to know why? The next morning, Elizabeth drove to Sunnyvale Assisted Living Center, her mind swirling with questions. The facility director greeted her warmly. Mrs. Morgan, right on schedule. Your mother's having a good day. Elizabeth nodded, afraid to speak and reveal her confusion. She followed the director down a sun-filled corridor to a garden room where an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair, gazing out the window. Mom, Elizabeth whispered, not recognizing the frail woman before her. The woman turned, her face lighting up. Lizzie. Right on time as always. Elizabeth approached cautiously, searching for familiarity in the weathered face. This woman looked nothing like the mother in her memories, or the photos David had shown her of her deceased parents. I finished that book you brought last month, her mother continued. Such a twist ending. Elizabeth sat beside her, fighting tears. I'm glad you enjoyed it. For an hour, she listened as her mother chatted about books, facility gossip, and people Elizabeth didn't recognize. Occasionally, her mother referenced their monthly visits and Elizabeth's consistent generosity in handling her finances since the incident. Before leaving, Elizabeth spoke privately with the facility director. My husband usually handles the financial arrangements, she began carefully. Oh no, Mrs. Morgan. You've always handled everything personally. Every month for 7 years like clockwork. Elizabeth nodded, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. And my mother's condition? The director consulted her file. Early onset dementia, diagnosed 8 years ago, following the traumatic home invasion that resulted in your father's death. Home invasion, not heart attack. Can you tell me about that? I find it difficult to discuss. Of course. According to our records, intruders broke into your parents' home. Your father confronted them and was killed. Your mother witnessed it, triggering her cognitive decline. You arranged her care here after she became unable to testify at the trial. Trial? Elizabeth thanked the director and hurried to her car, making a phone call to an old law school friend who now worked for the district attorney's office. 2 hours later, she sat in a cafe reviewing court documents. The case was technically sealed, but her friend had owed her a favor from their student days. The home invasion had targeted her parents' extensive art collection, primarily authentication documents for several valuable pieces. The lead suspect had escaped prosecution due to evidence contamination. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she examined the case photos. The police sketch of the suspect bore a striking resemblance to a younger David, with minor alterations. Her phone rang, the unknown number that had been sending mysterious texts. Who are you? Elizabeth demanded. Someone who knows what he did to your family. The female voice was vaguely familiar. My name is Sophia Winters. The other woman. Why are you doing this? Elizabeth asked. Because he's doing the same thing to me that he did to you. The medication, the isolation, the lies. How did you find out? I overheard him on the phone talking about managing me the way he managed you. I started investigating and found everything. Why not go to the police? With what evidence? Everything leads back to untraceable accounts and shell companies. He's brilliant at covering his tracks. Sophia paused. But there's one thing he couldn't hide. What? The original artwork. Still missing from your parents' collection. The insurance company never paid out because the pieces were never authenticated. The documentation was the real target of the robbery. But if those pieces suddenly appeared, where would they be? Thank Elizabeth. Where would he hide things he never wants you to find? Elizabeth's mind raced to the one room in their house David had designed entirely himself, the room she was forbidden to alter in any way, his home office. Elizabeth waited until David left for his overnight business trip to New York. She knew now he was really staying with Sophia, maintaining their parallel relationship while keeping both women medicated and isolated. With trembling hands, she entered his office. Unlike the warm, inviting spaces in the rest of their home, this room was stark, modern, and cold, reflecting, she now realized, his true personality rather than the charming persona he presented to the world. She started with the obvious places: file cabinets, desk drawers, wall safe, using his birth year code again. Nothing revelatory. Then she recalled a renovation detail from years earlier. David had insisted on a specific custom bookcase with unusual dimensions. Elizabeth examined it carefully, noting that the bottom shelf seemed shallower than the others. She removed the books and pressed along the back panel until she heard a faint click. A false back swung open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were stacks of documents, financial records for offshore accounts, multiple passports in different names with David's photo, and a thumb drive. Elizabeth connected it to her laptop. The drive contained hundreds of images of artwork, the missing pieces from her parents' collection, photographed in different locations over the years. Most disturbing were emails between David and auction houses, discussing private sales of pieces using the authentication documents stolen from her parents. Elizabeth sank into David's chair, the full truth finally emerging. David Morgan wasn't even his real name. According to the passports, he was Alexander Whitmore, a name that triggered a distant memory from her art history days. She searched online, finding old articles about an authentication scandal involving a Whitmore family member who had disappeared after being implicated in a forgery scheme. The family photo showed a much younger David Alexander. Further searches revealed the sophistication of his operation. He'd used her parents' documents to authenticate and sell forgeries while keeping the genuine articles hidden, building a fortune through a complex network of shell companies. But why maintain relationships with both her and Sophia? The answer lay in their professional connections. Elizabeth had unwittingly provided access to the American art market through her gallery work, while Sophia, according to emails on the drive, was positioned in European auction houses. The ultimate revelation came in a document titled Final Liquidation. David planned to sell all remaining authentic pieces in a private auction next month, after which both Elizabeth and Sophia would suffer unfortunate accidents, leaving him to inherit both estates through carefully falsified wills. The accidents were already in motion. Elizabeth found receipts for untraceable chemicals and detailed notes on mimicking natural health events. Her daily supplement was gradually increasing in dosage. As the full horror of her situation became clear, Elizabeth heard her phone chime with a text from Sophia. "He knows. Get out now." Seconds later, she heard the front door open. "Elizabeth?" David's voice called from downstairs. "I came home early to surprise you." Elizabeth quickly returned everything to the hidden compartment, closed the false back, and replaced the books. She grabbed only the thumb drive, slipping it into her pocket as footsteps approached the office. She sat at David's computer and pulled up a random email, feigning surprise when he appeared in the doorway. "David, I thought you were in New York." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Meeting canceled. What are you doing in here?" The gallery's system crashed. "Needed to send an urgent email." She stood, brushing past him. "Did you eat? I can make something." In the kitchen, she felt his eyes following her every move. The David she thought she knew would have accepted her explanation without question. This man, Alexander, was assessing, calculating. "You look pale," he remarked, opening the refrigerator. "Have you taken your supplements today?" "This morning," she lied, keeping her back to him as she chopped vegetables. "I think you missed your evening dose." He approached with a glass of water and her pill organizer. "Here." Elizabeth took them, pretending to swallow while palming the pill. "Thanks for looking out for me." They ate dinner in strained silence. David kept checking his phone, frowning at messages. Elizabeth maintained casual conversation, asking about his truncated trip, noting each lie for what it was. "I think I'll take a bath and turn in early," she said after dinner. "Migraines coming back." Upstairs, she packed an overnight bag, concealing it under the bathroom sink. When David eventually joined her in bed, she pretended to sleep until his breathing deepened. 2 a.m., she slipped out of bed and retrieved her bag. In the hallway, her phone vibrated with a text from Sophia. "Meet me at the agreed location." Brought everything. Elizabeth had never arranged a meeting location. This was a trap. She changed direction, heading not for the front door but for the garage, taking David's car keys instead of her own. As she eased out of the driveway, she noticed a dark sedan parked down the street. Sophia wasn't working alone. Elizabeth drove to the police station but stopped before entering. What evidence did she actually have? A thumb drive that could easily have been manufactured. Medical records she could have altered. A woman she'd never met who was likely still working with David. Her word against his, and he'd spent 15 years establishing her as emotionally unstable. She drove instead to a 24-hour cafe with public Wi-Fi. There, she transferred everything from the thumb drive to a secure email account, then sent copies to her work email, her law school friend, and to the insurance company that had handled her parents' claim. Next, she withdrew the maximum amount from their joint account at an ATM, knowing David would track the transaction. Let him think she was panicking, running. By sunrise, Elizabeth had formulated her plan. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't confront. She would do something David never expected from the docile, dependent woman he'd manufactured. She would outmaneuver him at his own game. She called her gallery director. "Claire, I need emergency family leave. 2 weeks." "Everything okay with David?" "Perfect," Elizabeth lied. "It's about my mother." Next, she called the assisted living facility and arranged for her mother's temporary transfer to a new location, using the emergency protocols established in her mother's care plan, a plan she had apparently created but had no memory of. Finally, she texted David, "Needed space to think. Staying with Amanda for a few days. Please don't contact me." His response came immediately. "What's going on?" "Talk to me. I found the pills. I know they're not vitamins. I don't know what's real anymore." A perfect truth wrapped in a strategic omission. Let him think she was questioning her sanity, not his identity. "I can explain everything. Come home and we'll talk." Elizabeth turned off her phone and drove to a hotel using cash, registering under her maiden name. In her room, she spread out printouts of everything she'd discovered and began constructing a case that even David couldn't manipulate his way out of. The ultimate decision wasn't whether to confront him or disappear. It was how to ensure that this time Alexander Whitmore would face justice, not just for her, but for her parents, for Sophia, and for every person whose life he destroyed in his relentless pursuit of wealth and power. 1 month later, Elizabeth entered the courthouse wearing a recording device provided by the FBI Art Crimes Division. After her evidence had been verified, they'd moved quickly, building a case against David Morgan that extended far beyond what even Elizabeth had uncovered. His criminal enterprise spanned continents and decades. The forgeries were only part of it. He'd orchestrated similar scenarios with 3 women before Elizabeth, each one left penniless or dead after serving their purpose. Sophia Winters had indeed been his accomplice initially, before becoming his next target when she discovered too much. Her cooperation had been secured in exchange for immunity. Elizabeth took her seat in the front row of the courtroom. The weight she'd carried for 15 years, the fog of medication, the constructed memories, the isolation, had lifted during her month of freedom. Her mother, now in a specialized care facility with proper treatment, had shown remarkable improvement once removed from the medication David had been secretly administering during his own devoted visits. The side door opened, and officers led David in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller somehow, his charismatic presence diminished by confinement. His eyes scanned the courtroom until they found Elizabeth. She met his gaze steadily. Proceedings began. Prosecution outlined the charges: multiple counts of fraud, forgery, identity theft, attempted murder, and 2 successful murders, including her father. When Elizabeth was called to testify, she approached the stand calmly. David watched her with the calculating expression she now recognized as his true face. "Mrs. Morgan," the prosecutor began, "when did you first suspect your husband wasn't who he claimed to be?" Elizabeth glanced at David before answering. "On our 15th anniversary, when he forgot which lie he'd told me about Rome." For 3 hours, she detailed the psychological manipulation, the medications, the systematic isolation, and the evidence she'd gathered. Throughout her testimony, David's expression never changed. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to portray Elizabeth as unstable and vindictive. "Isn't it true that you've been treated for anxiety and memory issues for years?" "Yes," Elizabeth replied. "With medications my husband administered to keep me confused and dependent, as confirmed by toxicology reports." When court adjourned for the day, Elizabeth gathered her belongings. As she passed the defense table, David spoke softly. "You'll never prove all of it," he murmured. "There will always be accounts you can't find, pieces you can't recover." Elizabeth paused. "I don't need to find everything. You taught me that, the long game." Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for comments. Elizabeth declined, walking instead to the car where her mother waited with a nurse. Court case would continue for weeks, but this chapter of her life was closing. Later that evening, as she settled her mother into her guest room, the doorbell rang. A courier delivered a small package, a habit she'd grown wary of. Inside was a crystal figurine of a phoenix and a note in unfamiliar handwriting, from one survivor to another. "You are not alone." Elizabeth placed the figurine on her mantle, a reminder that even the most perfectly constructed lies eventually shatter against persistent truth. On her dining table lay brochures for art therapy programs, her new focus after discovering the healing power of reclaiming her own narrative. Her phone chimed with a text from her law school friend at the DA's office. "New evidence found in storage unit. Case against him just got stronger." Elizabeth smiled, feeling not triumph but something quieter, the peace of reclaiming her story. In her home office, formerly David's space, now transformed with warm colors and personal touches, she opened her journal and wrote the final entry about the man she had married. "Today I said goodbye, not to David Morgan, who never existed, but to the woman I became for him. The long emptiness that defined our marriage has been filled with something unexpected, the discovery of my own resilience. The life he stole from me cannot be returned, but the life ahead belongs entirely to me. And that, finally, is enough." She closed the journal and added it to a box labeled "The Past." Tomorrow would begin without his shadow. Tomorrow would be hers alone to define. The end.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the story, like, subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. Thank you.